Yeah. I know what you're thinking, Mason. Is it a little too early to be updating rankings? And what I would say is it's never too early to have the most accurate rankings in fantasy football. Tier 1 running backs before week 1, I was just calling it Barkley, Bijan, and Gibbs. But I think we're going to have to update that. Now, I'm going to keep Saquon Barkley as my running back 1. I still don't really have any concerns here whatsoever. You have the 3-down usage, and at the same time, you're on arguably the best team in the NFL. What is there not to love if you're the most talented player on the best team? Bijan Robinson, I'm going to move ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Gibbs we have to move down just given the fact that it looks like Ben Johnson's departure from Detroit really should raise some red flags, ring some alarm bells, whatever you want to call it. With Gibbs, Bijan, you get the big receiving play where you show off the athleticism, and realistically, 3-down bell cow in an offense that's going to be okay. McCaffrey's going to be my running back 3. Now, I will let you know right now that when I put out my week 2 rankings, McCaffrey's probably going to be number 1. But I still think if I were offered Christian McCaffrey in my league where I have Saquon Barkley, I would reject it because there is still inherently risk with McCaffrey that I don't believe we have with the other running backs in this tier. Derrick Henry is a running back that over and over and over again has embarrassed me. Hell, I even went out on a limb and I said, you know what? For my underdog pick and pack on Sunday, I'm going to go with Derrick Henry to have his longest reception fewer than 5 yards, which if you look historically, very solid take to have with Derrick Henry. Right out the gate, he goes, F you, Mason. Here's one of the longest receptions I've had in the past 2 years. I got to wave the white flag, right? He's just going to jam it down our throats every single week. So Derrick Henry's a tier 1 player. Jahmyr Gibbs is still a tier 1 player. Don't get me wrong. Gibbs gives you a crazy high receiving floor that you get in a full PPR format. And I think the Detroit Lions offense will for sure be better going into future weeks. So it was a really tough matchup against the Packers. Gibbs is still in a committee though. So if Gibbs is the only back in tier 1 that's in a committee, and at the same time, we now have reasons to believe that the Detroit Lions may not be the best offense in this tier anymore, I think I would probably prefer like McCaffrey over Jahmyr Gibbs at this point in fantasy. I'm not going to fault you if you want to say that's ludicrous though. Now going down to our second tier, we are going to have Ashton Jeanty and then a lot of other running backs. Now this is not about Ashton Jeanty having a disappointing week 1. If anything, Ashton Jeanty was very exciting week 1 where you saw a ridiculous amount of snaps. Now, my concern with it is if I were just making these tiers, I can't be discounting Jonathan Taylor. Where Jonathan Taylor week 1, before the end of the game when it was meaningless, blah, blah, blah. For the first half, Jonathan Taylor played 100% of the snaps for the Indianapolis Colts. Go try to find a play in the first half of that game where Jonathan Taylor was not on the field. And Jonathan Taylor with Daniel Jones under center is seeing a higher overall target share because Daniel Jones is willing to check the ball down the way that Anthony Richardson wasn't. And on top of that, Jonathan Taylor has room for an even higher ceiling if we were to see that Daniel Jones doesn't just take all the rushing touchdowns to the goal line, which I think Daniel Jones is not going to do that going into the future. So Taylor gets a massive bump up for me from week 1. Also, Bucky Irving is going to get a bump up for me week 1. Now, you're probably not going to see this reflected in the positional rankings, right? Because I think all these running backs in this tier crushed it. But if you go over to my overall rankings on flogfantasy.com, there you'll see like all these running backs. I'm now like, yeah, give me them over Brian Thomas Jr. Give me them over the wide receivers I was taking at the 1-2 turn. These running backs are locked and loaded studs. Like Bucky Irving played 44 snaps in comparison to Rachaad White at 14 week 1. Now, obviously, the yardage totals weren't phenomenal, but honestly, with Bucky, going back and looking at what we had his rookie season, he already proved that he's an extremely talented running back. I'm not concerned about Bucky Irving's talent profile. The only thing you could have possibly been concerned with is what is the overall usage? Because obviously, Bucky's smaller back. They never really gave him the full 3-down workload even at the end of last year when he did turn into a league winner. But no, for us to see that he's actually getting that now, it is incredibly encouraging. And I think you should be very, very excited for Bucky Irving, especially in a full PPR format. Chase Brown is the only running back that had a carry in Cincinnati this past week. Now, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals were horrible. The offense looked like garbage against the Cleveland Browns. But I have faith in Joe Burrow. I have faith in this offense. Do I think they're going to be as good as they were last year? Who knows? But I think they're going to be a hell of a lot better than what they were in week 1. And if Chase Brown's going to get 100% of the opportunities here, what is there to stop him from being a top 5 running back like he was at the end of last season? So Chase Brown, he moves up my overall rankings. Again, all these running backs in this tier are phenomenal. So it's hard for me to justify like moving Chase Brown ahead of Ashton Jinty, but I mean, hell, they're in the same tier. So if you really wanted to, you could. Just obviously you can't move him ahead of like Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, CMC at this point. Josh Jacobs will be our next back. I started Jacobs in the Flock League. Obviously, I went out there and traded for him before the season started. The game that we had wasn't the best from a fantasy production perspective, mainly because Jacobs, his efficiency wasn't exactly there. And at the same time, the receiving usage wasn't there either. But you were really the only running back getting used in Green Bay. Potentially, the receiving involvement gets back to where it was in previous seasons. And maybe we get a bigger player too that really boosts Josh Jacobs overall. But I think the Packers are going to be a great team. I think they should be able to run the ball in the second half. And for that reason, we're going to go ahead. We're going to jam in Jacobs. Now, HN will be our next RB. With HN, he himself saved his day in Miami this past week. But at the same time, I have to move him behind these other running backs because he looks like he may be in a bottom 5 offense in the league. Like we go through and we look across the board. The Colts are pretty inspiring right now. The Raiders look decent week 1. The Bucs are going to be good. The Bengals are going to be good. The Packers are going to be good. So HN is the one guy that you maybe have to be concerned with. Talent profile, phenomenal. Receiving skill set, great. The offense probably will be better going into the future than it was. And HN still had the vast majority of the work for the Miami Dolphins here. So I think you have a running back with a great skill set and a great workload, just garbage offense. So I'd prefer the other guys in tier A over him. Now, moving down to our next tier, we're going to go Kyren Williams. Now, I talked about this in the video that we posted last night, but every single offseason, we get the buzz, we get the reports, people coming through and saying like, oh, Kyren Williams is a running back that's going to be in a committee. Oh, Blake Corum's going to have a larger role, blah, 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 blah. We get to week 1 and it doesn't matter because it didn't happen. Kyren Williams saw the same exact snap rate that he did last year. Kyren Williams doesn't get the receiving usage, which isn't great, but if you're going to get 80+% of the snaps and every single carry to the backfield, Kyron's been a locked and loaded RB1 for the past 2 seasons, and it looks like it's set up to be the same this year. Now, Amari Hampton, James Cook, Alvin Kamara will be our next 3. Now, full transparency, I was making this tier list, getting it to the editor, while the Buffalo Bills were still playing before we had the amazing comeback where Josh Allen made it where I'm going to start off 1-0 in the Flock League, at least hopefully, fingers crossed. That video will come out Tuesday, so you'll know for sure by then. But I think we probably got to move James Cook ahead of Amari Hampton now. I do want to talk about Hampton for just 1 second. Hampton, I know he disappointed you week 1. Do not worry about it at all. I know you have people on Twitter saying like, oh, he isn't good. He isn't good. Look at it. Look at his rushing yards over expectation. It was his first NFL game ever. He was going up against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Can we not give him the benefit of the doubt? Again, going back to his time at UNC, bell cow running back, receiving skill set, elite athleticism at the combine, first round NFL draft capital, and you just out-touched Najee Harris like 15-1. So I am more excited about Amari Hampton after week 1 than I was beforehand. Going and looking at Cook, obviously the Buffalo Bills score a zillion points. So James Cook's going to do quite well in that environment. You could see other running backs getting involved, but what I was very impressed by was the overall James Cook receiving role week 1 that I think should carry going into the future. Alvin Kamara, I have like a little alarm bell going off in the back of my head saying like, hey, he had 2 targets in a game where Spencer Rattler threw the ball almost 50 times. Is the receiving workload not going to be the same for Kamara? I think it was maybe just a bad week because realistically, we have such a large sample for Alvin Kamara drawing targets that for us to just say like, oh, Spencer Rattler is going to be the first quarterback ever that doesn't want to target Alvin Kamara, I think it was just a 1-week thing. Now, our next tier, Breece Hall obviously has to be a big-time riser. If we are looking at Breece, the split between him and Braylon Allen week 1 was exactly what you're wanting for if you drafted Breece Hall. While Braylon Allen was involved somewhat, Breece Hall had the vast majority of the work, and Breece Hall had almost everything as a receiver. The one drawback, which is keeping me from putting Breece Hall in tier B, is the fact that you had Braylon Allen at the goal line. Not only did you have Braylon at the goal line, but at the same time, with Breece, I would not expect the New York Jets to be as prolific of an offense going into the future as what they just were. So I think we're going to get some natural regression with the overall offense. I think Breece still showed that he is now going to be a must-start player every single week, regardless of the matchup. But I don't know if we have the top 5 running back upside if the offense regresses and Braylon still has somewhat of a role. Trevion Henderson will be our next back. Now, obviously, Trevion in my week 2 fantasy football rankings will be ranked much, much, much lower than this. Trevion Henderson, for the time being, is the running back 2 in New England. But in the long term, I still stand by Trevion Henderson as a much more talented running back than Ramondre Stevenson, is a much more talented running back than Antonio Gibson, and his role will continue to expand as the season goes on. Now, with their next running back, Chuba Hubbard, the role was exactly what we were expecting, right? And honestly, he did exactly what you would expect with said role. We saw him all last year doing it. The thing is, we've had 2 different Bryce Youngs through his NFL career. We've had the Bryce Young through his entire rookie season and through 90% of his second year be the worst quarterback in the NFL. Not a bad quarterback, not a horrible quarterback, the worst quarterback in the NFL. Statistically, just yards per pass, just look at it. And we had him at the very end of last season being competent, where Bryce Young looked above average for a small stretch of games at the end of last year. The thing with Chuba is if you wanted him to reach that running back 1 upside that he gave you at the end of last season, you would need Bryce Young to get back to being the quarterback that he was. But it looks like, based off the large sample size that we have, based off what we got week 1, where he was in a decent matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Bryce Young is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think what we had at the end of last year was maybe just an outlier. Now, Tony Pollard will be our next back. Pollard, honestly, I came away more impressed than I thought I was going to. Horrible matchup against the Denver Broncos, but obviously he has absolutely everything in this backfield until Tajay Spears comes back. So I actually think Pollard's going to be much higher in my week 2 rankings this week than he was a week ago. Now, our next tier, we are going to have James Conner. With Conner, I am really hoping, fingers crossed, that he disappoints from this price. And that's a horrible thing to say. It's a horrible thing to admit, but I just went so hard drafting Trey Benson this offseason and faded James Conner because of it. Because I love Trey Benson. I think that Benson is a great running back. I think Benson has the upside to be this year's Chase Brown. And with that, obviously, James Conner's a starter for the short term. We ranked him as a must-start option against New Orleans. Probably going to rank him as a must-start option in week 2 as well. But with the injury history that we have for Conner and the combined fact that I think Trey Benson will expand his role as time goes on, it is something that's worth mentioning. Now, going over and looking at DeAndre Swift. Now with Swift, if you were looking at expectations for the game tonight, Underdog currently has him higher, lower 54.5 rushing yards. They currently have him higher, lower 72.5 total yards and 9.45 fantasy points. I wouldn't mind taking the higher on 9.45 points, but ultimately that is going to be up to you because I am the literal worst at pick'em apparently, where I cannot get one right to save my life, but I'm not giving up. Mama didn't raise no quitter. So for tonight, I'm going to be going with Rome higher than 49.5 receiving yards, Caleb higher than 219.5, and Justin Jefferson for lower than 79.5. That is going to be a $10 pick'em to win about 66. If you wanted to tell me on that, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. If you use code FLOCK when you sign up to Underdog Fantasy, after you play your first $5, you're going to get $50 added to your account. And again, use code FLOCK if you want all the promos and you want to support this channel. Now, our next guy will be Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, big time faller. Before this week, he was in the tier above. And I know a lot of people go like, oh my gosh, overreactions, 1 week, blah, blah, blah. You cannot look at what happened in the Seattle backfield, where Zach Charbonnet was effectively the running back 1 here from a snaps perspective, from a touches perspective, from a fantasy points perspective, and not move Kenneth Walker down your rankings. Before you scream at me in the comment section that we shouldn't be overreacting this way, if I was overreacting, I would be ranking Zach Charbonnet over Kenneth Walker right now. But I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to look at what we've had for a large stretch of games at this point. And I'm going to give Kenneth Walker the benefit of the doubt. And we're going to assume that maybe this was due to the foot injury he's dealing with in camp. And maybe Walker actually does look to improve in future weeks. Now, RJ Harvey would be somebody that I'm for sure expecting to improve in future weeks. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is starting running back in the short term, but very similar to Trevion Henderson, I would expect that RJ Harvey expands his role as time goes on. Now, Travis Etienne will maybe be the biggest riser that I have in the running back rankings this week. Now, full transparency, I traded for him in the Flock League before the season started. So I have a lot riding on Etienne because now he may be going into my flex. So maybe I'm biased here, but looking at the usage that we had from Travis Etienne week 1, Travis Etienne looks like the starting back. Tank Bigsby had a tiny role. Byshell Tootin was nowhere to be seen. And it's not like just Travis Etienne got the volume and did nothing with it. No, he got the volume and he performed quite well. So I think Travis Etienne is startable. Now, matchups going into the future are going to be worse than what his matchup this past week was against Carolina, but I'm probably starting him in week 2. At least myself, I'm in a 12-team full PPR double flex format. Now, David Montgomery has to be a faller. I want to move Montgomery behind Aaron Jones, Pacheco, Javonte, Tracy, Jalen Warren, because realistically in my week 2 rankings, Montgomery's probably going to be behind those guys. The only reason I'm giving Montgomery the benefit of the doubt above everybody else in this tier is nobody in this tier has the upside to be a top 5 running back, where David Montgomery does have that upside. It would have to see a Jahmyr Gibbs injury, but if Gibbs were to go down, then Montgomery turns into a tier S running back in our rankings. So for that reason, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. We're going to be moving him to the top of this tier, but obviously previously he was in tier D, but the offense being so bad in Detroit, I felt like we needed to move him down. Aaron Jones will be our next back. We have not had a chance to see Aaron Jones play just yet. If you're looking at the expectations for Aaron Jones on Underdog, he is higher, lower 49.5 rushing yards, higher, lower 70.5 total yards, and higher, lower 10.45 fantasy points. Isaiah Pacheco will be our next running back. What's tough with Pacheco is he split the backfield literally 50-50 with Kareem Hunt week 1. He was not usable at all last season after the injury. And now, you're not going to be starting him week 2 because he's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. I want to nuke Pacheco in my rankings. I want to move Pacheco down 2 tiers. I'm going to try not to overreact. We're going to see what the split is against Philly in week 2. But if Kareem Hunt has as large of a role as what he did in week 1, Pacheco will probably fall down to running back 36 or so for me, where it's hey, you kind of need an injury to Kareem Hunt in that case. Javonte Williams, obviously a massive riser. You had Jaden Blue's healthy scratch, Miles Sanders fumbling in the game after Javonte Williams had 2 rushing touchdowns. And it was also a really tough matchup. I understand you don't have Jalen Carter, but still, there will be game environments in which Dallas actually wins the game. They're able to run the ball in the second half. And if Javonte is the full-blown starter, I mean, he's a running back that was seen to be very talented before his injuries zapped his athleticism. Tyron Tracy will be our next back. So the thing with Tracy is, what you would need is you would need Jackson Dart to come in and elevate this offense. For the time being, this is a bottom 3 offense in the NFL. And this is a bottom 3 offense in the NFL, and I personally don't think that Tyron Tracy is some elite level talent. And you have both Devin Singletary and Cam Scottaboo getting involved, and we'd assume the rookie expands his role as time goes on. Tracy's like a borderline running back 2 flex play that I don't know if he's going to be that way forever for you. Jalen Warren also borderline running back 2/flex play, but the expectations would be that you have Caleb Johnson expanding his role as time goes on. Now, based off how little involved Caleb Johnson was week 1, am I super concerned with that? Probably not, because again, Caleb would even have to jump Kenneth Gainwell in this backfield. Now, our next tier will be led off with Quinshon Judkins. Judkins should be playing in week 2. My bet on the lead back in this backfield would be Quinshon over Dylan Sampson. I think Quinshon Judkins was the much better prospect. Quinshon Judkins has much more invested into him by the team. And right now, it doesn't look like Judkins is going to be seeing a massive suspension, if any. Now, I'm not going to put Judkins that high because Dylan Sampson's going to be involved. Dylan Sampson was a phenomenal receiving back in week 1. For you to go out there and for you to have that kind of usage over Jerome Ford as a day 3 NFL draft pick, right out the gate, super impressive from Dylan Sampson. And the reality of the situation is I think it's probably going to be a running back by committee, or it's hard to trust any of these guys. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Zach Charbonnet will be our two backs afterwards. With JCM, I really want to see the continued trend of them pushing Jeremy McNichols out of this backfield. I have JCM in the Flock League, and realistically, I cannot start him until this 3-man running back by committee hopefully turns into a 2-man running back by committee. And then I know Zach Charbonnet being this low in the rankings is going to blow people's minds because Zach Charbonnet wasn't ranked much lower than this before week 1, where he went out there and he split the backfield effectively 50-50 with Kenneth Walker. Here's my thought process with Charbonnet. I think at the end of the day, until we see otherwise, I can't start Zach Charbonnet with the healthy Kenneth Walker. I would put him in like Jordan Mason in that range. Obviously, we'll see what Jordan Mason does tonight, but like these are running backs that I'm not really starting, even if they have roles. Like in best ball drafts now, maybe all of a sudden Zach Charbonnet is better because he's going to give you usable weeks. But in your regular fantasy football league, can I get excited about throwing Zach Charbonnet to my lineup? He's going to project to get 10 touches? Probably not. Now, of course, he does have that appeal where if you were to get an injury to Kenneth Walker and Kenneth Walker were to miss the game, Zach Charbonnet would go up to being a tier S running back for us in our rankings. But if we only get 1 to 2 more weeks of Charbonnet splitting this backfield 50-50 with Kenneth Walker will probably fall down to tier E, and Charbonnet will probably rise up to tier E. Now, J.K. Dobbins will be our next back. With Dobbins, he's definitely startable for now as a running back 2, flex play option, but very confident that we're going to have R.J. Harvey expanding his role as time goes on. Caleb Johnson will be our next back. With Caleb, like, I'm pretty sure he had negative fantasy points at the end of the day today, right? He had like negative 0.2. You had Kenneth Gainwell playing over him. So it is a long, long road for Caleb Johnson to be viable in fantasy. I would not drop him. Of course I wouldn't. But we can't start him anytime soon. Now, Jordan Mason will be our next back. If we are looking at Mason, should be split in the backfield with Aaron Jones tonight. But again, we'll see exactly what happens. And I'm going to be updating the rankings on flogfantasy.com literally every single day this year. You will not be able to find a single day in which you log onto the site and you go and hit sort by Mason Dodd and those aren't up to date for you, other than the dynasty ones. The dynasty ones I'm not going to be doing every day. Joe Mixon will be our next running back. Joe Mixon, actually, we moved him up our rankings a bit after the first week, and that's what I'm going to be doing with like Jordan Addison in the wide receiver rankings, Rashee Rice in the wide receiver rankings. Every week that injured player, every week that suspended player has go by, the higher they're going to move in my overall rankings because they're going to be 1 week closer to returning. Austin Eckler will be our next back. With Eckler, push out Jeremy McNichols and you can move up these rankings. But for the time being, it's a 3-man running back by committee where it looks like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has the majority of the upside. Trey Benson will be our next back. With Trey Benson, absolutely loved getting the usable week for our best ball teams. And at the end of the day, I love the confirmation that we get that if James Conner were to go down, Trey Benson could be a league winner. And then the last running back we're going to have is Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson has fluctuated wildly in our rankings. We've moved him up to RB 31 whenever we thought there was a chance that Christian McCaffrey injury was going to be very serious. But now it just looks like Brian Robinson's going to get the meaningless carries in San Francisco. The carries in between the 20-yard lines, which really don't equal fantasy points. And honestly, it's a good thing for McCaffrey owners in my mind. That's going to keep CMC healthy for CMC to have the usage at the goal line and as a receiver. And now Brian Robinson's effectively just a premium handcuff back. But I think that's all I got for you. Obviously, we have other running backs on the rankings like Nick Chubb, Braylon Allen, Dylan Sampson, Cam Scatterby, Ray Davis. You can find them on flogfantasy.com. I'm going to keep my updated rankings there all the time. But if you wanted to tail us with that underdog pick'em, again, what I'm going to be going with, it's a 6.6x. Rome Odunze higher than 49.5 receiving yards. Caleb higher than 219.5 passing yards. Justin Jefferson lower than 79.5. Now, I definitely will warn you, there's nobody worse on this planet than pick'ems than this guy right here. I just went 0 for 100 with everything that we had week 1. I didn't come remotely close to hitting a single one, but if you wanted to lose $10, you can find the link in the description, find it in the comment section, use code FLOCK when you sign up to Underdog Fantasy, And after you play your first $5, you'll get $50 added to your account. And you can hopefully one of these days finally win something with me, but it's going to be a long ways into the future. But I really appreciate you, and I really hope we get a good game tonight.